And welcome back, listeners. We are so excited that you're here for another episode of the Invisible Threat Podcast. And as is normal, I'm joined here by Dr. Matt Eby, co-author of the Invisible Threat book. I'm super excited about this upcoming episode and where we're going to go after this as well. I don't want to get too much into it yet, Matt, but I'm really, really excited about it, and I cannot wait for the listeners to hear what they're getting ready to hear. But before we get started, let's go ahead and bring you in. You are actually not in Kansas City, which is normal. That's where you live now. You're actually out in the Sin City area. What's going on with that?
Out here just doing some work. We have a very excellent client out here, which we've had for many years. So Joanne and I are just doing some work out here. And Joanne won't be on the podcast this week, just Carter and I. So we have some really great information for our listeners this week. And going in, Carter, as I said, we'll be talking about the individuals this week as opposed to the organizations. So I think that listeners will get some really great information from this particular episode.
Yeah, I mean, they can be able to get a little bit more granular with it, right? They can kind of think specifically themselves, not the overarching organizations, right? Well, before we get into it, we timestamped it last week with it was Masters Week. Well, now here we are. We're in Masters, post-Masters Tuesday. I'm having withdrawals already, as you can imagine. But it was interesting. My better half, Christina, she shared today with me. I don't know what took her so long. She actually shared, and I got to share this with you and Joanne too. She shared the file, the Google Drive file of all those pictures that we took when we were at the Masters in 2023. And I'm going through all these pictures. I'm like, look at this picture of you and Matt. It was so awesome. I mean, you were just like Cheshire cat grinning, like you're sort of encapsulating what you've been starting to experience on something that you had never experienced before and had no idea what it was going to be like.
Like I said to listeners, if even if you're not a golfer, boy, going to the Masters should be on your bucket list. Absolutely. Like other major events around different, places in the world, the Masters, go to Augusta. It is just one of those things that is unbelievable to be able to experience. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Kind of historic. Rory McIlroy, the first time in 24 years that back-to-back winners of the Masters happened. So
I was really rooting for him as watching him struggle through all of the first 2 days, just playing so well, and then struggling through the second 2 days and watching Scotty chasing him, right? So it reminded me of Tiger back in the day when Tiger used to just wait and pace for the last day and be 6 strokes down and then chase whoever was in the lead. So
no doubt about it. Well, down to the individual level, and it's going to kind of sort of mirror what we're going to be talking about today, right? Down to the individual judgments of somebody can determine the outcome, right? So, Matt, we've actually spent the first 10 episodes talking about judgment as we, move into this now, right? So what it is, how it works, where it breaks down, right? And as I'm sharing this with you, I'm thinking about the judgment from an individual perspectives of a professional golfer like Rory McIlroy or Scotty Scheffler or Bryson DeChambeau, who didn't even make the cut this week. And you think about the judgments they make along the way. But I think we've been talking about it at a distance, like it's something organizations deal with, right? Something committees, quote unquote, manage, right? Something systems try to control. But isn't there a point where this gets a lot more personal?
well, yeah, and as you're saying, you could see that in the Masters, right? And as it's coming down, the different plays and shots they're making, whatever, all about the judgment, right? And so, yeah, there is, right? Because the reality is, for us, judgment doesn't live in policy. It doesn't live in the trust agreement in the document. And it certainly doesn't live in the process. And I wanted to share this with you, and maybe you actually saw it. There's a line that I heard recently. Joanne and I were watching that movie Air. Maybe you've seen it,
Yeah, great movie.
where Nike is trying to get Michael Jordan to sign with them. And the Nike team was talking about the new shoe, the Air Jordan, that they were designing for Michael in the hopes that it would induce him to sign with them. And the shoe designer, Peter Moore, I think was his name, and he said that the shoe they designed was just that. It was just a shoe until, that is, Michael Jordan steps into it. And that's a powerful point in that movie. And it really resonated with me. But I got to thinking about it and I realized a trust is the same way. It's just a document until a fiduciary steps into it, into the intent of the grantor, the hopes and the dreams of leaving a legacy that will survive their passing, and the very real life of the surviving beneficiaries. The moment that fiduciary enters the trust and begins to exercise discretion.
Yeah. So where the individual fiduciary, right, has to pull together a lot of things, and what has become ultimately it's become a real life situation now, right? Probably with a lot of interpersonal dynamics going on, historically speaking, what's all gone on, like behind the scenes, of which those that are going to be making that judgment, they don't really know the backstory and the history, and typically speaking, right?
They don't. But that's exactly right. And that's where the fiduciary judgment begins.
Yeah, and of course, ultimately, that is a lot more revealing now that they're like in this moment.
It is, because now we're talking about the person making and forming the judgment and the need for them to integrate structure, empathy, discernment under dynamic conditions rather than merely complying with some rules.
So, what are those individual fiduciaries, right? Those people now making decisions and judgments. What are they leaning toward?
That's the insight here in episode 11. Because what we found is that when judgment gets challenging, when there's ambiguity, the people who are in the position of being tasked with exercising discretion tend to orient in one of four directions, not as personality or as a role, but as a way of stabilizing themselves under pressure.
So, this isn't about who you are, it's about where you go when things become challenging or difficult.
Yeah, where you go as a fiduciary. And sometimes the pull is towards the document itself.
Sure.
They go back to the language and read it again. They're looking for something firm to stand on. And it feels right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course it does, right? That's their standard operating procedure, right? So that's the moment where, you kind of got to say, this is what the document says, so this is what we do.
And that instinct is valid. But under pressure, it shifts. The document stops being the guide and starts becoming the boundary. And what started as principled judgment becomes rigid judgment.
What a great phrase, rigid judgment. And I couldn't have put it any better, right? So I see what you're saying. And what's another direction as another option that the individual can go in?
There can be a different pull towards prudence, towards caution, risk management. The
Sure.
fiduciary starts thinking ahead about how this might be viewed in the future, how it will hold up under scrutiny, what issues it might create.
Well, this is where the question really begs, will this come back on us? Right? I mean, that's you have to think that when they're trying to make this rigid judgment, right? That in the back of their mind, even maybe, will this come back on us?
Yeah. And so, as we discussed earlier, is my reputation at risk, or is the institution's reputation at risk? Because it's going to come back on us in the future. And again, that's part of the job. But under pressure, it shifts. The safest answer starts to feel like the right answer. And what started as careful judgment becomes defensive judgment.
And we've talked about that before, right? So, just out of curiosity, is there another way?
There is. There's a pull towards the beneficiary, towards fairness, context, lived experience.
Yeah, this is where you start thinking. You start thinking, what does this person actually need right now? Like you're trying to think inside of their brain. Like, what is it that they actually need?
Yeah, and that instinct matters. But under pressure, it shifts. The desire to respond quickly starts to outweigh the discipline to hold. We want to close the moment, find the answer. And what started as empathetic judgment becomes inconsistent judgment.
So, we've also talked about that, right? So I know that not all decisions can or even should be the same, right? In any decision you make. But here it sounds like losing empathy and moving toward inconsistent judgment, it's not a good place for a fiduciary to be.
That's right. Which leads to those moments where the fiduciary tries to hold all of this at once and step back to look at the full picture.
And this is where it almost feels like there there's not a clean answer anymore.
Exactly. Too many variables, too many competing pulls on those people making the decisions. And instead of clarity, they hesitate. What started as integrative judgment becomes uncertain judgment.
And just to pull in, because it made me think about whenever I was watching that final round at the Masters, Justin Rose was on hole number 11, and he's over the ball and he's ready to hit the shot. And he backs away
Yep.
as he's indecisive. And he goes on to go like double bogey, bogey.
Yep.
He three putt pars after reaching the green on 13. And in that instant, kind of like what you're talking about, right?
Exactly.
That's where that can happen.
It's exactly right. Same
Yeah.
exact type of mental process.
So these are actually 4 different ways of responding to the same pressure.
And here's the key. These aren't 4 different types of fiduciaries.
Yeah. So this isn't a personality framework.
Yeah, you didn't have 4 different Justin Roses out there, right? Not at
Right?
all. It's a judgment on the individual making these decisions, judging for themselves. In our world, we call them exercising discretion. And these are directions, the ways fiduciaries orient themselves when judgments get challenging.
So it's not who you are.
It's a tendency of where you go.
So, Matt, whenever I think, me personally, I'm being objective, I might actually just be defaulting to something out of like history or like what's the case there?
Habit. It's the place where you feel most comfortable when decisions get challenging. So you're exactly right. In the case of when you think that you're simply applying policy, you might be just defaulting to structure. Or if you think that you're being fair, you're defaulting to empathy. If you think you're managing risk, you could be just defaulting to protection.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I'm applying that to myself right now, just thinking about that, right? Judgments I've made as a owner, business leader, parent, right? So the decision isn't just about the situation, it's about what I'm trying to protect.
Exactly right. And that's where the defaults come from. The most time, that part is invisible. You're simply not aware of what you're trying to protect.
So this actually sounds like it's a really hard thing if you're a quote unquote fiduciary, right? It almost feels like you can't quite connect it, and it's somewhat elusive.
And that's why no one teaches this, because it's not about the rule, it's not about the law, it's not about the policy. It's about the individual person applying it.
Right. And once you see that, does the question ultimately change?
Of course, that's what we've been saying, because it's no longer what's the right answer. The question becomes, what's influencing the way I'm answering?
And if that's true, then the obvious next question is,
What influences are shaping my tendency?
yeah, exactly. And here's what's exciting. That right there is where we go next in episode 12. Most organizations move past these moments. We don't. Matt, I want to thank you again for being my awesome co host. I'm super excited about episode 12. I'm even more excited the fact that we're going to get a chance to connect again here. And listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another episode. Make sure you come back for episode 12, because I'm telling you right now, what we are just getting ready to tap into is going to open your mind to all of these things that we're talking about, especially with regard to the dissertation and how it applies to the invisible threat. So, Matt, thank you so much again for joining us on the podcast. And I really do look forward to us getting a chance to actually press the flesh and meet again this
Yep.
weekend. It's been
Look forward
a
to it.
few. It's only been a few weeks since we saw each other. So I'm excited to be able to make it so quick again on the turnaround. So,
Yep.
um, anyway, I know that we're going to also see co-author. I got to give shout out again, co-author to The Invisible Threat, Joanne. We're going to get to see her as well. So listeners, thank you again for joining us. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And make sure you hit that like button. And anytime you come here, just know that we are here to deliver very useful wealth of knowledge information that we pull out from Dr. Matt, as we call him. So until next time, listeners, we will see you on the Invisible Threat Podcast. Thank you, Dr. Matt.
Thanks, Carter. Good seeing everyone. Bye.